The stars had always seemed peaceful to Grace Sullivan. She remembered sitting on her father's porch in Virginia as a little girl, watching the night sky and dreaming of what might be out there. Now she knew the answer, and it terrified her. The Valkyrie ships appeared without warning on a Tuesday morning in June. One moment the sky was blue and clear. The next moment it was filled with thousands of crystalline vessels that sparkled like diamonds in the sunlight. They were beautiful in a way that made Grace's stomach turn. Beautiful things should not bring death. Grace stood on the bridge of the USS Relentless, a destroyer that suddenly felt very small. Around her, the crew worked in tense silence. Chief Petty Officer Danny Vega stood beside her, his hands gripping the railing so hard his knuckles had turned white. "How many ships?" Grace asked, though she already knew the answer would not help. "Sensors counted over 6,000 before they went dark," Danny replied. His voice was steady, but Grace could see the fear in his eyes. She felt the same fear in her own heart. The alien broadcast came through every speaker, every radio, every device capable of receiving a signal. The voice was cold and mechanical, translated into perfect English by technology humans could not begin to understand. "Species of Earth, we are the Valkyrie Empire. We have conquered 17 star systems. Your world is now the 18th. You will surrender all military forces. You will submit to imperial rule. Resistance will result in extinction. You have 6 hours to comply." Grace watched the message repeat across the globe. She imagined billions of people hearing those words at the same moment. Mothers holding their children. Workers stopping in the middle of their day. Soldiers looking up at a sky filled with enemies they could not fight. Then the pulse came. Every light on the Relentless flickered and died. Every screen went black. Every system that required electricity simply stopped working. Grace heard shouts of confusion from below deck as the great ship went silent. "They killed the power grid," Danny said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not just us, everything." He was right. Grace could see the coast from where they floated, and every city had gone dark. The aliens had turned off human civilization with a single wave of their hand in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. General Patricia Cole received the news through a backup communication system that ran on old technology the pulse could not touch. She was a woman of 63 years who had served her country through 4 wars. She had seen terrible things and made terrible decisions. But she had never faced anything like this. "What do we have?" She asked her staff. The answers came quickly and without hope. The Navy was dead in the water. The Air Force was grounded. Nuclear launch systems were offline. Communication networks had collapsed. In the span of 30 minutes, humanity had been reduced to the technology of the 19th century. Patricia looked at the faces around her. Young officers and old veterans alike wore the same expression of shock. They were waiting for her to say something, to give them hope, to tell them what to do. She thought of her grandchildren in Seattle. She thought of all the children across the world who were looking up at an alien sky and wondering if they would live to see tomorrow. "We fight," Patricia said. Her voice was calm and certain. "We fight with whatever we have. Rifles, knives, rocks if we have to. These things came to our home and told us to kneel. I don't know about you, but I've never been good at kneeling." A young captain named Marcus Hall spoke up. "General, with respect, how do we fight ships that can fly between stars? How do we fight technology we don't understand?" Patricia smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a wolf showing its teeth. "The same way we've always fought," she said. "We adapt. We learn. We refuse to die." The first Valkyrie landing party touched down near a small town in Kansas. They expected to find frightened humans ready to submit. Their previous conquests had taught them that primitive species always surrendered once they understood the power of the Empire. The Velthari soldiers were tall and thin, with gray skin and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. They wore armor made of the same crystal as their ships, and they carried weapons that could turn a human body to ash in seconds. Commander Keth led the party of 20 soldiers through the empty streets. The humans had fled, as expected. They always fled at first. Later they would return, broken and obedient, ready to serve their new masters. A sound made Keth pause. It was faint, almost lost in the wind. The sound of something mechanical. The pickup truck came around the corner at 60 miles per hour. Behind the wheel sat an old farmer named Henry Adams, a man who had worked this land for 50 years and refused to run from anyone. Henry crashed the truck directly into the Suraj, center of the Velthari formation. The explosion that followed was not from alien technology. It was from 40 gallons of gasoline and a spark. 3 Velthari soldiers died instantly. 4 more were injured badly enough that they could not stand. Commander Keth survived only because he had stepped behind a building at the last moment. He stood in shock, watching his soldiers burn. This had never happened before. Conquered species did not fight back. They did not sacrifice themselves in hopeless attacks. They did not choose death over submission. Henry Adams died in that explosion. He was the first human to kill a Velthari soldier. He would not be the last. News of the attack spread through human communities faster than the aliens could have imagined. Without internet or television, people shared the story by word of mouth, the way their ancestors had done for thousands of years. A farmer in Kansas had fought back. A simple man with a truck and some gasoline had killed alien soldiers. The invaders could be hurt. The invaders could die. On the bridge of his command carrier, High Commander Zereth received the report of the Kansas incident with mild annoyance. One primitive had attacked his soldiers. An inconvenience, nothing more. The occupation would proceed as planned. He did not understand what had truly happened that day. He did not realize that Henry Adams had done something far more dangerous than killing 3 soldiers. The old farmer had proven that the Velthari could bleed. And now every human on Earth knew it. Grace Sullivan heard the story that night, passed along by a sailor who had heard it from a fisherman who had heard it from a truck driver. She felt something change inside her chest. The fear was still there, but now it had company. Hope, anger, determination. The aliens had come to conquer Earth. They expected sheep. They were about to discover they had found something else entirely. The real war was just beginning. 3 months had passed since the invasion began. The Velthari flags now flew over every major city on Earth. Their soldiers walked the streets of New York and London and Tokyo, as if they owned them. High Commander Zereth had declared total victory and sent word to the Empire that another world had fallen. He was lying to himself. Sophie Martinez had been a chemistry teacher before the aliens came. She had spent her days teaching teenagers about molecules and reactions and the basic building blocks of the universe. Now she spent her nights teaching adults how to make bombs. Her resistance cell operated out of an abandoned warehouse in El Paso. 47 people looked to her for leadership, and she had learned to give it to them. She had also learned that the knowledge she once used to help students pass exams could be turned into something far more dangerous. The Velthari scanners are looking for explosives they know, Sophie explained to her fighters. Military compounds, commercial products. They don't understand that humans have been making things explode since we discovered fire. She held up a simple glass bottle filled with a mixture that looked like dirty water. This is made from cleaning supplies you can find under any kitchen sink. Their scanners don't recognize it as a weapon. But when it touches Velthari armor, it eats through the crystal like acid through paper. The fighters practiced making the mixture until they could do it in the dark. They practiced throwing the bottles until their arms ached. And when the next Valkyrie patrol came through their neighborhood, they were ready. 8 alien soldiers died that night. Sophie lost 2 of her own people, but she gained something more valuable than any weapon. She gained a reputation. Word spread through the underground networks that a teacher in Texas had found a way to hurt the invaders. Other resistance leaders came to learn her secrets. Across the ocean, Kevin Price was fighting a different kind of war. The former paratrooper had been living in Montana when the invasion began, enjoying a quiet retirement after 20 years of military service. That retirement ended the moment the first Valkyrie ship appeared in the sky. Kevin understood something the aliens did not. He understood terrain. He understood how to use mountains and forests and rivers against an enemy who relied on technology instead of instinct. They scanned for heat signatures, Kevin told his growing army of fighters. So we cover ourselves in mud and hide in cold water. They track movement from the sky. So we move only at night, under the trees, where their satellites can't see us. They expect us to fight like soldiers. So we fight like ghosts. His tactics were simple but effective. A Valkyrie supply convoy would enter a mountain pass and never come out. Alien soldiers would be found dead in the morning with no explanation of how they died. Equipment would vanish from secured locations as if it had simply walked away. The Valkyrie commanders could not understand what was happening. Their species had evolved beyond physical conflict millions of years ago. They fought with ships and weapons in overwhelming force. The idea of crawling through mud to cut an enemy's throat in the dark was something their minds could not process. Kevin used that weakness against them every single day. In the ruins of Chicago, Bethany Cole worked on a problem that could change everything. The young woman had been a hacker before the invasion, breaking into corporate systems for money and government systems for fun. Now she was trying to break into something far more complex. The Valkyrie ships communicated through resonance frequencies. Their crystalline structures vibrated at specific patterns to send information across vast distances. Bethany had figured this out by studying the wreckage of a crashed scout ship. "It's like music," she explained to the small team of engineers and scientists working with her. "They're singing to each other in a language we can't hear. But if we can learn that language, we can jam it. We can make their ships deaf and blind." The work took weeks. Bethany slept only a few hours each night, sustained by coffee and determination. She learned the alien frequencies through trial and error, building crude jamming devices from salvaged parts. The first test came on a rainy night in October. A Valkyrie patrol ship flew over Lake Michigan, its sensors searching for human activity below. Bethany activated her jammer from a hidden bunker on the shore. The ship wobbled in the air. Its lights flickered. Then, slowly, it began to fall. The pilot tried to regain control, but his systems were screaming with static. The ship hit the water with a tremendous splash and sank beneath the waves. Bethany watched it disappear with tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness. Tears of joy. High Commander Zereth received reports of the crash and dismissed it as a mechanical failure. When 5 more ships fell from the sky that week, he became concerned. When 50 crashed over the following month, he became afraid. Something was wrong. The occupation was not proceeding as planned. His soldiers were dying in numbers that should have been impossible. His ships were falling without explanation. His commanders were requesting reinforcements and receiving only silence from an empire that had already moved on to other conquests. The humans were supposed to be broken by now. Every other species had surrendered completely within the first month. They had accepted their place as servants of the Empire and stopped fighting. But these humans would not stop. General Patricia Cole coordinated the resistance from her bunker in the mountains. She received reports from cells across the world through a network of messengers and hidden radio stations. The picture they painted was one of chaos and hope. Sophie Martinez destroyed a garrison in Texas, one report said. Kevin Price captured an alien weapons depot in Montana, said another. Bethany Cole's jamming technology is being copied by resistance groups in Europe and Asia. Patricia studied the reports and began to see a pattern. The Valkyrie were not invincible. They were powerful, yes. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans possessed. But they were also arrogant. They were also predictable. They were also completely unprepared for an enemy that refused to follow the rules. She began to plan something bigger. Something that would show the galaxy that Earth was not conquered. Something that would make the Valkyrie Empire understand what they had truly awakened. When they came to this small blue planet, the resistance was no longer just surviving. It was growing. It was learning. It was becoming something the aliens had never faced before. A world united in rage and purpose. A species that would rather die than submit. An enemy that fought not with honor or logic, but with fury and creativity and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. Sophie Martinez, Kevin Price, Bethany Cole, Patricia Cole, Grace Sullivan. Thousands of others whose names would never be recorded, but whose actions would shake the stars. The Valkyrie had conquered 17 worlds. They had never lost a single battle. That record was about to end. 1 year after the first alien ship appeared in Earth's sky, the last Valkyrie soldier on the planet surrendered. He was found hiding in a cave in Montana by a group of teenagers armed with hunting rifles and homemade explosives. The children of the invasion had grown up fast. The soldier's name was Tiff. He had been a junior officer when his species came to conquer Earth. Now he was the last of his kind on this strange blue world, and he could not understand what had happened. "You were supposed to surrender," Tiff told his captors through a translation device. "Every species surrenders. It is the natural order of things." One of the teenagers, a girl named Amy Peters, laughed at him. "I guess no one told us that. Humanity had won." But the people who had led the resistance knew that winning was not enough. The Valkyrie Empire was still out there among the stars. They would return with more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. Earth needed to strike first. Nathan Brooks had been a physics professor at a small college in New Mexico before the invasion. Now he was the most important scientist on the planet, working in a garage with salvaged alien technology and whatever equipment he could find. He had done something that should have taken centuries. He had figured out how the Valkyrie faster-than-light drives worked. "It's not really faster than light," Nathan explained to the military council that now governed Earth's war effort. "They fold space. They create a bubble where the normal rules don't apply. It's beautiful, actually. Beautiful and terrifying." Maria Santos worked with Nathan to build the first human starship. They used captured Valkyrie technology as a foundation and filled in the gaps with human engineering. The result was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They named it the Endeavor. Grace Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Endeavor and felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. She had survived the attack on the command carrier. She had become a symbol of the resistance. Now she was being asked to lead humanity's first journey to another star. Danny Vega stood beside her, as he always did. "You ready for this, Captain?" Grace smiled at the title. She had been promoted so many times in the past year that she had lost count. "Ready as I'll ever be." The Endeavor's first mission was to the Valkyrie colony on Proxima Centauri b, the nearest star system to Earth. Intelligence suggested a small garrison there, weakened by the transfer of troops to the failed Earth invasion. The colony expected reinforcements from the Empire. Instead, they got Grace Sullivan broadcasting a message across all frequencies. "People of Proxima," Grace said, her voice calm and steady. "You came to our home. Now we're coming to yours. Surrender, and you will be treated with the mercy you never showed us. Fight, and you will learn why the occupation of Earth failed." The garrison commander laughed at the message. One primitive ship against his defenses? This would be easy. He stopped laughing when the Endeavor destroyed his orbital stations in the first 30 seconds of the battle. Nathan Brooks had done more than copy Valtteri technology. He had improved it. The Endeavor's weapons fired faster and hit harder than anything the aliens possessed. Its shields absorbed punishment that would have destroyed a Valtteri frigate. Its engines could outrun any pursuit. The battle for Proxima lasted 4 hours. When it was over, humanity had claimed its first victory among the stars. But Grace did not simply conquer the colony. She did something the Valtteri had never done in 3 centuries of expansion. She freed the slaves. The Valtteri Empire had conquered 17 species before coming to Earth. Those species now served as workers and servants throughout the galaxy. On Proxima, Grace found thousands of them living in misery under alien rule. "You're free," Grace told them through translators. "We're not here to be your new masters. We're here to end the empire that enslaved you." The former slaves did not believe her at first. Freedom was a concept they had forgotten generations ago. But as Grace gave them food and medicine and weapons, they began to understand that something had changed in the galaxy. Word spread faster than light through the networks of the oppressed. A new species had risen against the Valtteri. A species that fought not for conquest, but for liberation. A species that refused to accept the natural order of things. Admiral Chris Young led the main fleet that followed the Endeavor into the stars. His ships were crewed by humans and their new allies, species who had accepted their chains until someone showed them they could be broken. The campaign lasted 2 years. World after world fell to the human advance. The Valtteri sent fleet after fleet to stop them, but nothing worked. Humans fought in ways the Empire could not predict. They took risks that seemed insane. They won battles they should have lost through sheer determination and creativity. Sophie Martinez led the ground assault on the Valtteri Military Academy. Kevin Price planned the infiltration of their intelligence headquarters. Bethany Cole cracked the encryption on their communication network. Every person who had led the resistance on Earth now led the liberation of the galaxy. High Commander Zereth had escaped the destruction of his command carrier. He had returned to the Valtteri homeworld in disgrace, stripped of rank and power. Now he watched from a prison cell as human ships appeared in his home sky. "This cannot be happening," Zereth whispered. "This cannot be happening." But it was. Chris Young led the final assault with a fleet of 300 ships. Human vessels flew alongside craft piloted by species the Valtteri had conquered centuries ago. They came not as conquerors, but as liberators. The battle for the Valtteri homeworld lasted 7 days. The Empire threw everything they had at the attackers. Ancient weapons, secret technologies, desperate tactics. Nothing was enough. When human soldiers breached the crystal spires of the Imperial Palace, they found the Valtteri Emperor hiding in his throne room. He was ancient, his gray skin wrinkled with age, his mirror eyes dim with fear. Grace Sullivan was the one who accepted his surrender. "How?" the Emperor asked, his voice barely audible. "How did you do this?" "We are the masters of the galaxy. We have ruled for 1,000 years." Grace looked at the defeated ruler of a fallen empire. She thought about Henry Adams, the farmer who had crashed his truck into alien soldiers on the first day of the invasion. She thought about all the people who had died to bring humanity to this moment. "You made a mistake," Grace said. "You thought we were like the others. You thought we would kneel. You thought wrong." The empire that had conquered 17 worlds fell to the 18th, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the invasion, the Valtteri controlled the cities, but feared the wild places. Their soldiers walked the streets of civilization in groups of 20 or more, weapons always ready, eyes always watching. But they did not enter the forests. They did not climb the mountains. They did not venture into the endless countryside where humans disappeared like smoke in the wind. Hi, Commander Zyrith had lost over 3,000 soldiers. This number would have been acceptable in a war between equals. Against a primitive species that should have surrendered in days, it was a disaster. He could not report these losses to the Empire. He could not admit that his conquest was turning into something far more dangerous. Admiral Chris Young had spent the first weeks of the invasion hiding in a coal mine in Virginia with 200 sailors and Marines. They had survived on stored supplies and water from underground streams. They had waited for an opportunity that seemed like it would never come. Then Bethany Coles. Jamming technology reached them through the resistance network. Chris studied the alien ship they had captured during a raid on a small landing site. The Valkyrie frigate was damaged but not destroyed. Its crystal hull gleamed in the dim light of their underground base, beautiful and deadly. "Can we fly it?" Chris asked Maria Santos, a naval engineer who had become his most valuable officer. Maria looked at the alien controls with the eyes of someone solving an impossible puzzle. "Not as it is. Their systems are designed for their bodies, their minds. But if we strip out their controls and replace them with something human, maybe." The work took 3 weeks. Maria and her team worked without rest, cutting into alien crystal and welding human metal, connecting systems that were never meant to be joined. The result was ugly. Wires hung from panels. Human screens sat beside alien displays. The navigation system was controlled by a video game controller that a young Marine had kept in his bag, but it worked. Chris named the ship the Rising Fury. He thought it was appropriate that the plan Patricia Cole developed was simple in concept and nearly impossible in execution. The Valkyrie command carrier hung in orbit above the Atlantic Ocean, directing the occupation from a position of complete safety. No human weapon could reach it. No human aircraft could fly high enough to threaten it, but a stolen Valkyrie ship could. They gathered volunteers from resistance cells across the continent, 200 men and women who understood they were probably going to die. They loaded the Rising Fury and 11 other captured ships with nuclear warheads wrapped in lead to fool alien sensors. They said goodbye to their families through messages that might never be delivered. Grace Sullivan was one of the volunteers. Danny Vega refused to let her go alone. "Someone has to survive to tell the story," Danny said with a sad smile. "Might as well be both of us or neither of us." The attack began at midnight on a clear December night. 12 ships rose from hidden locations across North America, their stolen drives pushing them toward the stars. The Valkyrie did not detect them at first. Their sensors were looking for human technology, not their own. High Commander Zyrith was reviewing casualty reports when the alarm sounded. He looked at his tactical display and felt his blood run cold. 12 ships were approaching his carrier. 12 ships broadcasting human identification codes through Valkyrie systems. How is this possible? He demanded. How did they learn to fly our ships? No one could answer him. The command carrier opened fire with weapons that could destroy cities. The Rising Fury took a hit that killed 20 people instantly. 3 other ships were destroyed before they got within striking distance. But the remaining 8 kept coming. Chris Young guided the Rising Fury through a storm of alien fire, his hands steady on the human controls Maria had installed. Beside him, Grace worked the weapon systems they had barely figured out how to use. "Get me close," Grace said. "I just need to get close." The nuclear warhead they carried was a relic from the Cold War, a weapon designed to end human civilization. Now, it was aimed at something far more deserving. Chris flew the Rising Fury into the command carrier's hangar bay. The ship crashed through crystalline doors and slid across the alien deck, throwing sparks and debris in all directions. Around them, Valkyrie soldiers ran in confusion. "Go," Grace told Chris. "I'll finish this." Chris wanted to argue. He wanted to stay. But he had a duty to the people still alive on his ship. He grabbed Danny and the surviving crew and ran for the emergency escape pods. The Valkyrie had so thoughtfully provided. Grace watched them go. Then she looked at the trigger in her hand. She thought about her father's porch in Virginia. She thought about the stars she had dreamed about as a child. She thought about all the people on Earth who were counting on this moment. She pushed the button. The explosion lit up the night sky across 3 continents. People looked up from their hiding places and saw the fireball where the command carrier had been. They did not know what had happened. They did not know who had died to make it possible, but they knew the aliens could be hurt. The Valkyrie Occupation Force lost its command structure in that single moment. Commanders on the ground had no orders. Ships in orbit had no coordination. The invincible empire had been wounded in a way they never thought possible, and humanity struck resistance. Cells attacked simultaneously across every continent. Sophie Martinez led her fighters against the garrison in Houston. Kevin Price's army swept through Montana and Wyoming. In Europe and Asia and Africa and South America, humans who had been waiting for this moment rose up with stolen weapons and homemade explosives. The Valkyrie fought back, but they were scattered and confused. They had never faced a coordinated uprising. They had never seen a species where every single individual considered themselves a soldier in an undeclared war. The battle lasted 3 days. When it was over, the Valkyrie had lost half their remaining forces on Earth. Their occupation was broken. Grace Sullivan survived. The escape pod had carried her, and the others to the Atlantic Ocean, where a fishing boat picked them up 12 hours later. She learned about the attacks on the ground through the resistance network. She learned that her sacrifice had not been in vain. Chris Young found her sitting on the deck of the fishing boat, staring at the sky where the command carrier had been. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it." Grace shook her head. "We did it. All of us. Every person who fought. Every person who refused to kneel." She looked at her hands, still black with smoke and alien blood. These hands had killed thousands of Valkyrie soldiers. These hands had changed the course of a war. These hands were just getting started. The occupation of Earth had failed. Now it was time to take the fight to the stars. 3 years after the Valkyrie invaded Earth, their empire surrendered unconditionally. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire, carried by ships and signals and whispered hopes. The masters had fallen. The slaves were free. The universe had changed forever. High Commander Zyreth was brought before a tribunal of humans and liberated species. He had led the invasion of Earth. He had ordered the deaths of millions. He had believed that his people were destined to rule all lesser creatures. Now he sat in chains, facing judgment from the very species he had tried to conquer. The trial lasted 3 months. Witnesses from Earth and 17 other worlds told their stories. Farmers and teachers and soldiers described what the Valkyrie had done to their homes. Former slaves showed the scars on their bodies and the emptiness in their eyes. Zyreth listened to it all without expression. He had no defense. He had no regret. He simply could not understand how everything had gone so wrong. The tribunal sentenced him to life, imprisonment on a human facility in the mountains of Colorado. It was, they said, more mercy than he had ever shown anyone else. Zyreth spent his remaining years in that prison, writing his memoirs. He had been a military commander, trained to analyze victories and defeats. Now he analyzed the greatest defeat in the history of his species. His final words became famous across the galaxy. Every school taught them. Every military academy studied them. They were carved into monuments on 100 worlds. "We believed ourselves masters of the stars," Zyreth wrote. "We had conquered 17 species without significant resistance. Then we found the humans, In our arrogance, we saw a primitive world ripe for harvest. We did not understand that we had awakened something ancient and terrible. A species forged in the crucible of constant conflict, where the weak perished and the strong grew stronger. They did not fear death. They embraced it as the price of defiance. We thought we were predators. We discovered we were prey. The Galactic Council was formed 1 year after the fall of the Empire. Representatives from 19 species gathered on a space station built in the ruins of the Veltari command structure. They came to create something new, something better, something that would ensure no empire could ever rise to dominate the galaxy again. Sophie Martinez was chosen to represent humanity. The chemistry teacher from El Paso had become the most respected voice of her species. She had led the resistance. She had fought in the liberation campaigns. She has shown the galaxy what humans were capable of. Behind her stood Kevin Price, now a general in the unified human military. His guerrilla tactics had been adopted by freedom fighters on a dozen worlds. Bethany Cole stood beside him, her jamming technology now the foundation of galactic communication security. Nathan Brooks was there too, the scientist whose work in a garage had opened the stars to his people. And Grace Sullivan, of course. The woman who had destroyed the command carrier. The woman who had freed Proxima. The woman who had accepted the Emperor's surrender. They stood together on the council floor, representing a species that had gone from primitive isolation to galactic leadership in 3 short years. The first speaker was from a species called the Marthani. They had been slaves of the Veltari for 600 years. Their representative was old and tired, but her voice was strong. "We have a question for the humans," she said. "One that all the liberated species wish to ask." Sophie nodded. "Ask, how did you do it? How did you defeat an enemy that had conquered so many?" "We tried to resist when they came for us. We failed. 16 other species tried and failed. What made you different?" Sophie thought about the question for a long moment. She thought about Henry Adams and his truck. She thought about the children who had captured the last Veltari soldier. She thought about all the ordinary people who had done extraordinary things. "You came to Earth expecting sheep," Sophie finally said. "You found wolves." The council chamber was silent. The Marthani representative leaned forward. "Wolves?" Sophie smiled. "On our world, there are animals called sheep. They are gentle and fearful. When predators come, they run or they die. But there are also wolves. They do not run. They do not accept that they are prey. They fight back, always, no matter the odds." She looked around the chamber at the faces of species who had known nothing but oppression for generations. The Veltari made a mistake that predators often make. They looked at us and saw prey. They saw a species that had never traveled beyond their own moon, that fought among themselves, that seemed weak and divided. They did not see what we really were. Kevin Price spoke next. "We are a species that has spent our entire history at war, not just with each other, with nature, with disease, with the limitations of our own bodies and minds. Every generation of humans has faced extinction and survived. Every child is raised with stories of ancestors who fought impossible battles and won." Bethany Cole added her voice. "We adapt. That is our greatest strength. Your technology was superior to ours in every way. So we stole it. We learned it. We improved it. We took your weapons and turned them against you." Nathan Brooks nodded. "And we refuse to accept defeat. Other species surrender when the battle is lost. Humans do not understand that concept. We will fight with our last breath, our last bullet, our last drop of blood. Death is preferable to submission." Grace Sullivan was the last to speak. The Veltari ruled through fear. They believed that overwhelming force would break any resistance. They did not understand that some things cannot be broken. Some fires cannot be put out. Some spirits cannot be crushed. She stepped forward, her voice rising to fill the chamber. We are humans. We are the species that climbed out of caves and conquered our world. We are the species that split the atom and walked on the moon. We are the species that looked at the stars and refused to accept that they were beyond our reach. The Valkyrie thought they were masters of the galaxy. They were wrong. There are no masters. There are only free beings and those who would enslave them. Sophie took over again. We did not fight just for ourselves. We fought for every species that had suffered under the Empire. We fought for the Morthani and the Kelith and all the others who had been told they were inferior. We fought because it was right. And now, Sophie continued, we offer the galaxy a choice. We can build something new together. A federation of free species, where no one is master and no one is slave. Where conflicts are resolved through negotiation, not conquest. Where every being has value. She paused, looking at each representative in turn. Or we can return to the old ways. War and conquest and suffering. We have shown that we are capable of terrible violence when pushed. We would rather use that strength to build than to destroy. The vote was unanimous. The Galactic Federation was born that day, with humanity as its founding member and protector. The Age of Empires was over. The Age of Freedom had begun. Years later, when historians wrote about the invasion of Earth, they always ended with the same observation. The Valkyrie had conquered 17 worlds through fear and force. They had built an empire that lasted 1,000 years. Then they made the mistake of attacking a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. They found humans there, and the humans changed everything. On the memorial, built to honor those who died in the invasion and liberation, there is a simple inscription. It was written by Grace Sullivan, who served as the first human ambassador to the Federation until her death at the age of 93. They came to Earth as conquerors. They left as prisoners. They thought they were writing the end of our story. They did not understand that our story was just beginning. Beneath those words is a single image. A small blue marble floating in the darkness of space. Home. The world that taught the galaxy to be afraid. The world that humanity would always protect. The world where wolves learned to reach for the stars.